Hey, what's up, Street Dogs? The Eric from the Eric from Street Photography blog. So, I want to give you guys some basic tips on how to overcome your fears of photographing strangers. So, first of all, if you want access to the full res PDF, just go to erickinphotography.com/blog/newsletter and just put in your newsletter. I am dope at erickinphotography.com. Click subscribe, and you could have access to this full PDF version of the Ultimate Beginner's Guide for Street Photography series on how to overcome your fears of photographing strangers. And big ups to my sister Annette Kim for designing it. And let me just kind of walk you guys through the basic steps on how to overcome your fears of photographing strangers. So, step one. I actually think that it's a good strategy when you're shooting street photography to crouch down super low and make yourself look smaller than the subject. So the biggest benefit of doing this is that when you're shorter and smaller than people, you seem less intimidating. And also one practical tip is, especially if you're photographing somebody you're not sure how they're going to react, just tell them exactly what you find interesting or unique about them. So this guy, I saw him in this lowrider awesome bike in downtown LA. I'm like, dude, your bike looks dope. It looks so badass. And I shot with just like back in 2011 M9 off-camera flash. And in terms of the image, this is actually the behind-the-scenes picture of the photograph I made. So you can see that I shot this with a 35mm lens, crouched down super low, and the benefit of using the flash is it kind of separates them from the background, and I was able to get him against the background, which helps simplify and clean up the background. And another practical tip I give you guys in terms of baby steps is to try the fishing technique. So my sister Annette did this. It was awesome. It was like a person with a fishing pole and a baby. So first of all, identifying your scene. So this is one thing that Henri Cartier-Bresson often did in his photos, is that you'd find a nice background, a nice scene, a nice composition, essentially just waited for the subject to come into the frame, and then you take the picture and boom, you got the shot. So a practical example of the fishing technique is one picture that I shot in Korea. And essentially the way I was able to make the picture was I saw the nice simple background, I saw these nice leading lines, and it was just a nice scene. I just waited for the right person to come into the frame, and I was lucky enough that this one woman with this beautiful umbrella entered the scene, and I snapped a few photos and I made it. So the reason why they call this the fishing technique is because sometimes, you know, like a good fisherman, you hold your camera and you wait. Sometimes you get the fish, sometimes you don't. But what's more important is that you enjoy the process and you at least tried. Another practical tip is the video camera technique. So I'm sure you've been at some sort of touristy location, you see tourists with video cameras. When you're in a video camera recording, you don't really care, right? And it's because you kind of get the sense that the person shooting the video is just like a stupid tourist and you don't feel like you're the focus of the picture. So similarly, when you're shooting street photography, hold up your camera to your eye or hold up the camera, stick it outside of you, just use the LCD screen, and pretend like you're actually shooting a video or recording a video. And therefore people, when they think that you're just shooting a video, they're just going to ignore you. And so the practical biggest tip when you're using the video camera technique is do not move your camera down from your screen or check the photo on the screen. This will give your video camera technique away. So for example, while you're shooting pictures, keep your camera up to your eye and keep clicking, because the second you take a picture and then you drop your camera, then you're going to be super obvious that, you know, you've essentially taken a picture of somebody. So to give you guys a practical example of a nice video camera technique. So yeah, I kind of did it here. So I was on the Paris Metro, and I'm taking this picture. Saw this miserable looking guy suit on the subway. So I had my camera with my flash, crouched down, took a picture with the flash, and after I took the picture, I held the camera up, and I was pretending like I was just snapping some things behind him or just recording something behind him. So you could also use this in crowded areas. Or another practical tip is when you're shooting street photography, when you're just shooting on the streets, just hold your camera up and then you could work on photographing street pictures with interesting layers. So another good example of when I used the video camera technique and it worked out pretty well was this one picture that let's see, where is the gun? Not here, not here. Yeah, here it is. So I'm walking down the streets of downtown LA, and there's this crowd of just these masked people, and it was super interesting. And I just kind of got in the crowd and just kept clicking, clicking, clicking. And as I'm holding the camera up, I didn't drop the camera down immediately. So everyone just kind of ignored me. And the benefit of this, I'm shooting with a wide angle lens, a 35mm. I was able to shoot head on. And by shooting head on, the pictures are much more dynamic. They're much more edgy. They're much more energetic. So moving on. Also, another tip is ask for permission. So I don't think street photos have to be shot candidly. I think that you could ask for permission. And a good practical tip is when you're making portraits of strangers, don't say, do you mind if I take your picture, which sounds very forceful. Say, oh, do you mind if I make your portrait? It sounds much more artistic and sincere than take a picture, which is a little bit more cheap and selfish. Or even asking people open-ended questions like, what is your life story? And this gives you an opportunity to connect with your subjects in a positive way, and you kind of give them opportunity to essentially tell their life story. And the reason why it's good to ask people open-ended questions is that it's hard to photograph strangers while talking to them. And by asking them an open-ended question, another good tip is like, what is your dream? Or, even something as simple as like, what are you up to today? Then they start going to storytelling mode, they forget about the camera, and you start clicking. And don't forget to thank and compliment your subjects for saying yes. Or even things you could tell people is like, oh, show me your power pose. Or even giving the subject an opportunity to make a portrait of you. Say, oh, after I take a portrait of you or make a portrait of you, do you mind if you made a portrait of me too? So it kind of empowers your subject because it makes them part of the photo making process. So some examples of some street photos that I've made, which I'm actually quite proud of, are essentially these street portraits that, I see interesting people on the streets, and I was able to engage with them and make good portraits. So my famous laughing lady pictures, I chatted with this lady and I told her, oh, excuse me, miss, you have a beautiful smile, you have a beautiful pearl necklace. Do you mind if I made a few portraits? She said, yeah, sure. It took about 30 pictures, and about shot number 15, she looked at me and said, oh, you're crazy, ha 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 ha. I made the picture, and that's how I got the shot. Another example of a lady, I loved her, very deep glasses, and I approached her and I said, oh, excuse me, miss, I love your look and I love your glasses. Do you mind if I made a few portraits of you? And she said initially, yeah, I saw you eyeing me with your camera, and I was going to say no, but because you asked so nicely, yes. And just kind of realize that when you're shooting street portraits and you want to get very close to people, the secret isn't to just kind of pounce on them. It's to actually ask them for permission. And basically, based on my personal experiences, it's better to have somebody reject you than not ask at all. So some practical tips, quick tips in terms of boosting your confidence. Go over the worst possible case scenario when you're shooting street photos, that someone might yell at you or tell you to delete the picture, whatever. Often the fear of the worst case scenario is actually not that bad. Also, I recommend being friendly and genuine. Smiles are contagious. I'm a pretty smiley dude, so people trust me. And also, when you see an interesting scene or interesting person, don't just take 1 or 2 pictures and run away. My recommendation is for you guys to work the scene. And when I say work the scene, I mean to take many different pictures of the person. And the benefit of working the scene is you kind of get the opportunity to milk the scene for all it's worth. So you can see in this, the laughing lady picture, I shot about 29 pictures of her. It was actually shot 19 out of 29, which is the best shot. Another picture I have of another laughing lady here in Hanoi. Very similar to my laughing lady picture in New York City. And you could see, in order to make the best picture, I had shot about 19 pictures, because in the beginning, when I'm just taking the picture, I'm working the scene, I'm not exactly sure what my composition is. I shot these with the Ricoh GR. Sometimes the photos are blurry. And I just got lucky that this angle was the best, and I used the flash. I kept working the scene, because you never know what shot will be the best. And also, try to ask people who you think would say no, because often the people who look the scariest are actually the nicest. So for example, there's one picture I shot of this man in downtown LA. You know, whenever I see guys with face tattoos or neck tattoos, I kind of get a little bit scared. But, you know, I just complimented the man. I was like, oh, excuse me, sir, you look pretty badass. Do you mind if I made a few portraits of you? He said, yeah, sure. Ended up being the super nicest dude. So just don't judge people based on their appearances. Often the people who look the scariest are actually the nicest. So some final lessons and tips from Eric Kim, aka me. Realize that as a street photographer, you're not a thief, you're a visual artist. You're giving people an opportunity to feel special. There's millions and bajillions of people in the world. By you identifying somebody you want to photograph, you're essentially telling them you're special, you are beautiful, you're unique. The reason I want to make a photo of you is that I think you're special. So realize in street photography, you're essentially blessing people with your camera. Also, you kind of have to ask or know why you want to make a portrait of somebody. So if you see somebody interesting, be very specific about the details which you find interesting in that person. So for example, a guy with a neck tattoo, oh, you know, I think you look badass, or I like your neck tattoo. You could even ask open-ended questions like, oh, I bet that neck tattoo hurt like a motherfucker, didn't it? And he's like, yeah, and then he kind of goes into storytelling mode, or he's like, oh, what is the most painful tattoo to get? Is it on your neck? Is it on your face? And by asking people these open-ended questions, they don't just give you a typical posy look in street photos. Or you can just tell people to look into the lens and not smile. Try to take small risks every single day, because this will allow a little more variety to your life, and it helps you get accustomed to the fear of rejection, overcoming the fear of rejection. And the last tip I would give you guys is, yeah, be like a kid and have fun. Photography should be a tool for you to find more joy and more happiness in your photos in your life. It shouldn't be adding stress and anxiety and frustration to your life. So I like the quote, treat your play very seriously. And if you look at kids, they treat their play very seriously. As photographers, we're essentially big kids with cameras. So just make sure to go out there and have fun. If you want to commission your own visualization, contact Annette Kim at AnnetteKimArt@gmail.com. And if you want to learn more about empowering tools, check out hapticindustries.com. And we've got lots of really cool products and dope information to help empower you, and also just cool looking products. Or, you know, if you want to learn more about street photography, and go attend an Eric Kim experience, click experience, and check out some of my upcoming street photography workshops to empower you and for you to become the best photographer possible. And if you're new, just click start here. And I got tons of articles on Street Photography 101 to help you overcome your fears of shooting street photography. I'll include a link in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And ultimately, never doubt yourself, always be strong, and when in doubt, ask for permission. Peace out.